it's like the final exam for me today. You know, you study for your exams, and when the final one comes, you're very relieved. So I've enjoyed sharing with you God's word, and I very much appreciated your warm response, even though I can't see your faces here. Many of you have met me in the halls and so on, and as we'll see from the text, it's contrary to what Paul felt in going back to Corinth. He did not want to come back. It's as though I had a bad experience with you, and next year didn't want to come back to ELF. An awful thing. Very difficult, and we're going to see that. I'm standing before you this morning as a wounded leader. I tell you, plan to not be a wounded leader. But I'm not wounded because anybody wounded me. I'm wounded because of the last 3 or 4 years, I have carried the wounds of too many Christian friends who've been wounded by friendly fire. They've been wounded by people they love. They've been wounded by Christians they work with, by ministries they established, by people they discipled. And I carry that heavy burden. It's nothing compared to any challenges we face in ministry in Egypt. It's the heaviest burden I carry. And I think, as Charlie read that passage, you felt the wounds of the apostle. Paul was deeply hurt. He spent 1.5 years establishing the Corinthian church at great cost, and he had to escape at the end for persecution. He was kicked out of a synagogue. He started this meeting in Tyrannus' hall, and he continued for 2 years. But then he heard, after 2 visits, this feedback. Oh, Paul is timid in face-to-face contact. He's unimpressive in person. He's an untrained speaker whose speaking amounts to nothing. Imagine if you gave me that feedback in the hallways. I probably wouldn't have continued. Or I would have been very down. And as I say, when I see people's faces, I can be more encouraged. I can't see your faces, but I am encouraged by what you say. And to compensate for the above, they said, he deals with people strongly in writing. He's weak in person, so he writes us these awful letters. What criticism. Imagine, and that's why he says, I'm postponing coming to you. It's in the first, let's see now. Oops, okay. He was wounded and hurting because he was wounded by people he loved. You will not be too hurt if someone you don't love or someone you don't know criticizes you. It'll be annoying, but it won't hurt you deeply. But if your child or your parent or your spouse or leaders in your church or your pastor or your congregation hurts you, people you love, people you've sacrificed for, you'd be very, very disturbed. His good intentions were misunderstood. He did things for good intention, and they were interpreted for bad. And he feared that during his upcoming visit, instead of being thanked, he would be blamed. Isn't that awful? And that's why this letter is so unique in what Paul says. It's a transparent letter of a Christian worker who is wounded. And I'm going to share about some of these people I know who are wounded, and I think some of you may be wounded this morning. If you were wounded by the enemy, I wouldn't worry about you. I wouldn't be burdened for you. But when you're wounded by people you love and people you serve, then we feel we've lost the battle. What's the point? What's the point of preaching reconciliation? And someone told me, you didn't speak about reconciliation between man and man. It's just because the text wasn't focusing on it. But it's very, very important. How can a reconciler who calls for people to come to Jesus be in deep conflict with his fellow workers or deeply hurt by fellow workers? And we talk about this wonderful reconciliation with God, and we cannot reconcile with people close to us and who love us. And that's a burden I bring with you today, and it's a burden in that letter, so I'm not making it up, and it's the burden of Paul. And it's right through the letter. Like we said, suffering in terms of persecution or incidents seeps through the letter, but it's by outsiders, either events or people who are enemies of the gospel. Woundedness is all through the letter, but it's by people he loves, and it's much more serious. Let's look at this, and as I share, I'm going to focus on some people. I've changed the details so that hopefully you won't recognize them, or hopefully if they watch this video, they won't recognize themselves. Last year, I was asked I did a seminar on firing people. My personality profile is green. If you take it in colors, red is the person who's the man, the visionary, who goes ahead and tramples over people as he goes ahead. He's not worried about what happens. He just wants to accomplish the goal. Yellow is the social guy who wants to always have people with them. They say, let me use these quickly, say that. If you're standing in front of an elevator, the red guy, as soon as the door opens, runs in, pushes a button, and goes up. He doesn't care about the other people. The yellow guy never gets on the elevator. He's always wanting people to go ahead. The blue guy, once he gets in and counts, he looks how many people should be there, and he says, we're not going to move until one person gets out. And the green guy is just a nice guy who's standing around smiling at people. My profile is green. I'm just a nice guy. And if I didn't have very tough managers in the Bible Society, would be in chaos. So fortunately, my number two people, the people who are managing, are a bit tougher than I. They're also kind people, but they are tough. So one of the hardest things I've ever had to do is to fire people, to fire Christians, to fire people I believed in who did something terribly wrong. Now, if I get a chance, I'll mention some principles about that. But it doesn't mean you let sin go by. And you will see how Paul is trying to struggle with this. And we think of Paul as being more of a red guy, right? The guy who has go and he's going to found the churches and he's going to do. And here we see him very much as a man who struggles. You see the green in him. You see the hurt. You see the anguish. Let's look at it. He had been wounded by those he loved and served sacrificially. I wrote you as I did, so that when I came, I might not suffer pain from those who should have made me rejoice. How awful. To walk into a room expecting people to be happy, and then you suffer pain from them. That friendly fire. For I felt sure of all of you that my joy would be the joy of you all. For I wrote you out of much, listen to this, affliction and anguish of heart and with many tears. This is not the red Paul, the heartless Paul, the ambitious entrepreneur. This is Paul, the sensitive human being. Affliction, anguish of heart, and with many tears. This is not persecution. This is not the lashes, the 50 lashes minus one. It's not the shipwrecks. It's not the fights. It's not the beatings. It's a friendly fire. Affliction, anguish of heart, and many tears. I wrote to you not to cause you pain, but to let you know the abundant love that I have for you. It's a very difficult situation. They say that 85% of Bible characters ended badly. And I'm not sure of that figure. Someone told it to me this week as I was talking, but certainly a lot of them did. And they say that the majority of Christian leaders end up badly. And one of the purposes of me today is to help you not be wounded, to end well. And it doesn't mean people are retiring. Young people here will say, well, we're a long way from retirement. This is my third ministry at the Bible Society. I did 2 other ministries, left them to other people, and continued. So when you finish this particular ministry, finish it well. Don't finish it wounded. And the only way you can do this, and this is my main point today, is you have to plan to finish well. I have a friend in a country in Africa who developed an NGO introducing a particular ministry, a worldwide ministry, that wasn't known in this country. For 18 years, he labored. And eventually, that ministry became the most successful ministry of that international organization in Africa. He was very gifted. He loved a lot. He was really passionate. And he worked very, very hard. And it was a development agency, so a lot of money going and coming. And he had one of his disciples, a man he really trusted, as his financial officer. And this man handled all the finances. My friend made the mistake of giving his financial manager signed checks. That is, the chairman of the board would sign the check, the CEO, my friend, would sign the check, and he would hand a list of blank checks, blank checks that were signed to the financial manager. He trusted him. He believed in him. He had invested in him. One day he got a phone call from head office. And they said, the National Bank of your country phoned us because they received a check that you had signed that was for every cent in your account, made out to your financial manager. My friend collapsed. He fainted. He really couldn't believe it because they sent him a copy of the check. He was fired a month before his retirement and got no compensation, and he was never able to defend himself. A man of integrity. And then there was a court case, and he nearly went to jail. Took him 4 years to exonerate himself from the courts. Friendly fire, a disciple. I suffered with him, and I still suffer, because though he's healed from his wound, the scar remains. Brothers and sisters, financial things can be very, very dangerous, and even the best of friends and those you trust, work institutionally, work with systems, with checks and counter-checks. And several of the people I fired at the Bible Society were people who hoodwinked us, who cheated us financially, and they did it very, very cleverly. Fortunately, we were able to catch them, but it was very painful. Paul was hurting. I hurt for this friend of mine. He had been wounded by people, by the person he had served and helped to develop and build up. And then it was a Judas. It was a betrayal. It's not easy. It's very hard. And Paul felt that way. Anguish of heart with many tears. And my friend had anguish of heart for years and many tears. I sat with him and we went through it together. But in addition, he said his good intentions were misunderstood. Paul said, I've been a fool. You forced me to it, for I ought to have been commended by you. What I did, and this issue is a different issue, this issue is that of actually financial support. Paul thought the Corinthians would be happy if he didn't depend on them. He didn't want to feel that the people he was ministering to were paying his bills. He didn't want to be controlled by them, in a sense. He didn't want to be beholden to them. So he got the other churches to support him, and he served the Corinthians free of charge. The Corinthians accused him of being self-centered, of not being caring, of being too independent, whatever it is, and that's the issue. For I was not at all inferior to the super apostles, even though, and he talks about the signs of apostles were performed among you. He was trying to prove that he's as good as the other apostles. For in what were you less favored than the rest, except that I myself did not burden you? Forgive me this wrong. He's being very sarcastic, of course. Here, for the third time, I'm ready to come to you. I will not be a burden. He's being here stubborn. I'm not going to let you give me money. That's what he means. For I seek not what is yours, but you. I will most gladly spend and be spent for your souls. I don't want your money. I want your souls. and I'm going to suffer for your souls. I love you. If I love you more, am I to be loved less? This is my expression of love, but it's being misunderstood. It's like when I repair the car and tell my wife, and my wife says, why are you so late? You're late for supper and that kind of thing. I said, I was repairing the car for you. Doesn't convince my wife that I love her, that I got late. And I've learned that I have to know what her language of love is. Because what I do thinking, I'm making her happy. The time she'd rather me come to supper and let the car wait. And this kind of thing. So I've learned in marriage that you have to understand the language of the other person. Paul was wanting not to be supported by them for their sake because he loved them. If I love you more, am I to be loved less? That's what he thought. But granting that I myself didn't burden you, you say I was crafty. You say I got the better of you by deceit. Did I take advantage of you through any of those whom I sent to you? I think next verse, yeah, no, sorry, we go back. So he's saying basically that you're accusing me of being crafty. To me, it's a sign of love. You interpret it as a sign of craftiness, of deceit. And he was very, very hurt. His good intentions were misunderstood. I have another friend, who is the CEO of a Christian organization, again, in the developing world. And she was newly appointed and had great vision. They, like many countries in the developing world, the organization had an office in a downtown area. It was an old office, but the land was very valuable. And she got the idea to help support the organization of building a building on the land. They would be renting the other floors and have their office. She found a friend who was willing to develop a hotel on that property and give the organization more space than they had, and not own the land, so the land was still owned by the organization, and pay them rent after they had deducted the expenses of the building. So it seemed to her a great deal, and she went to her board very excited with that proposal. She found the board was waiting for her. It was a board executive, and they had a paper for her to sign, which was her resignation. You negotiated without consulting us. And she was fired. And they told her, you go back to the office, you stand outside the bottom of the building, because they met someone else. And they met somewhere else in the chairman's office, somewhere else. And the janitor will come down with a cardboard box of all your belongings. She was never allowed back into her office. And the issue was never discussed. She had not consulted the board. She was planning to consult the board. She thought they would be commending her. She thought she would be giving them the greatest deal in the history of the organization. But the board felt that she had betrayed them, and she had not consulted with them, because, you know, in developing countries, you don't keep secrets. So the word had gotten out that that organization was negotiating. And the board felt hurt that she was negotiating without consulting them. A complete misunderstanding, a complete mismatch of situation. But that person was terribly hurt, and has taken a long time to recuperate. We live in that, brothers and sisters. We live in that kind of thing where we misunderstand. Let's not use the weapons of the world. Paul says here, I'll read you that verse because I think it's a very powerful verse, but I didn't put on it. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. Paul says it in chapter 10, verse 4. The weapons are not. And yet we in Christian organizations often use, don't we, the weapons of the world. Our weapons are different. Our weapons are relationship. Our weapons are understanding. I'll use one example of firing that I was proud of my staff. I was away at a camp, and we had hired a new staff member. We didn't know him for a few years, and the staff came in the morning to the office, found our administrative floor, the glass door broken, and the main safe had been hacked open. And very difficult to open the safe. He had actually used a metal bar and spent all night breaking into the safe. We didn't have much money in the safe, but he took the money, took the papers, and he escaped. Fortunately, we had CCTV cameras. The staff stayed up all night because you have to watch the camera. they noticed first that he signed out. We have a fingerprinting thing, you know, you punch when you leave the office. They saw him sign out, and then they saw him come back. So on record, he was out, but the camera showed him not leaving the building. And then late at night, they saw him jumping out of a place, of a window, and going out the wall. They got the police. The boy was arrested. I wasn't there. And when you steal breaking into a safe, you get a much stricter jail sentence than you do if you just steal some money that someone left. It's considered in Egyptian law much more serious to break a safe. It's with complete intent. It's not that someone had left some money. So the police put him in jail. He was going to go in front of prosecution. He was expected to get 6 or 7 years prison sentence at least. He was a young man, had a young family. The police actually went to his home and forced him to get from under the mattress in his house the money that he had stolen. All the neighbors knew, the wife knew. It became a big scandal. He became a very disgraced man. So it was a Friday morning, it's a day off, but he was going to go to the prosecutor. It was 40-degree temperature. 3 of my senior staff, I wasn't there, went to the court. They asked to see the prosecutor. And they said, sir, this man has stolen the money. He's done this, but we think he's been disgraced enough. We want to tell you that we have nothing against him. And the guy said, it's not your decision. The police had found him. I have to pronounce a statement. They said, yes, but we don't want this man to lose his future. He's been humiliated enough. And they left. 90% he would get his 6-year jail. But that afternoon, he was a free man. He was let go. When I came back on Saturday to the office and the staff told me that, I said, they learned. I don't need to worry about the Bible Society. They know what values we stand for. Brothers and sisters, we don't need to take revenge. What value would this man be in an Egyptian prison for 6 years? Yes, he hurt us. Yes, he did something terrible. But do we use the weapons of the world? I'm hoping he saw the love of Christ. I'm hoping he saw forgiveness that would not. I'll do one more story. You've seen people say I'm a good storyteller. I was traveling, and I say always bad things happen when I travel. My wife went out, and we park on the street. So we always spend about 10 minutes finding out where we parked our car. You never figure out. And sometimes we don't find it very easily. She went around the block. She went everywhere. She didn't find the car. Finally, she figured it had been stolen. 2 days later, the police came to her house with a boy. And they said, you know this boy? She said, yes, he's a neighbor's boy upstairs. He walks our dog. Our children play with him. They're a poor family who live on the roof, and we know them. They said, we caught him trying to sell your car. A young boy my wife had invested in the family. Anyway, he was jailed. His family made an appeal, and the family told my wife to go to court on his behalf. The lawyer said, the only way we get him out is if you say that you gave him the keys. But you see, we had the keys inside the house. When he took the dog for a walk, he took the keys as well. She said, I won't lie, but I will go to court. I went with her that morning in the stolen car. I mean, we had it back. With the 2 parents, we drove down to the court. The judge came and said, who's this lady? She said, she's the lady whose car was stolen. He said, yes, but you're the lawyer for the defense. He said, yes, but she's coming on purpose for the defense. So he told her, madam, what defense do you have? The lawyer here says that you gave him the keys. Did you give the boy the keys? My wife said, no, I didn't give him the keys, but this is a good boy. I've invested a lot of time in him. The devil just got into him, and I'm pleading that you let him go because I know if he goes to jail, he will be a bad boy, but he's a good boy. The judge didn't seem impressed. But that night, the boy came free. The whole neighborhood talked about it. And I thought of a verse where it says that Jesus is going to intercede for us in front of the Father. We, whose sins he carried, He carried our sins on the cross. He died for us. Yet he's going to intercede for us. The power of love, brothers and sisters. We do not run Christian organizations like businesses. We run them with the love of Jesus. That's the green in me, of course. But it works. It works. We have very little turnover in the Bible Society because we care and believe in our people. We're not perfect. Some people left us angry. Not everybody's happy. But we try. Our intention. Paul tried from the depths of his heart. I love you. Am I to be loved less? And he gets a slap in the face. That's real life. And the Apostle Paul lived it, and we live it. And I live it today. And as I said, if I'm wounded, it's for all these people who've been wounded by people they love. And then he feared to be disappointed by what he may find in his upcoming. For I fear that perhaps when I come, I may find you not as I wish, and that you may find me not as you wish. Perhaps there may be quarreling, jealousy, anger, hostility, slander, gossip, conceit, disorder. Is that in your churches? You don't have any of that in your churches, do you? That's the New Testament church against which we're supposed to be a model, eh? Everybody says, our church is like the New Testament church. I say, God forbid. I don't want a church to be like this. Goodness gracious. Doesn't sound very good. He goes on. I fear that when I come again, my God may humble. Here the word humble is better to say humiliate me before you. That they have to mourn over many of those who sinned earlier and haven't repented of the impurity, sexual immorality, and sensuality that they've practiced. New Testament church, brothers and sisters, let's hope we've evolved from the New Testament church, but this is pretty bad stuff. He feared to be disappointed by what he may find in his upcoming visit. Mismatched expectations. I know a mission pastor in a Latin American church, a friend of mine, and this mission pastor worked for many years to develop Latin American missionaries to go all over the world. You know that the Latin American church now sends many missionaries. In those days it didn't, and he was one of the pioneers to develop missions in his church. He went to North America every year, to the United States, to raise money for the support of these missionaries. And he related to many churches in America. And these churches knew about his church in Latin America, and they knew about the wonderful mission they're doing among people in the world, and some of them came to the Middle East. He did this for 25 years. 25 years going to America once or twice a year, telling people to support Latin American missionaries to go and evangelize the rest of the world. He was raising millions of dollars for the work. His church was restructured. And the pastor, who was his best friend, said, I'm going to give you the best position in the restructuring. You're going to be the fundraiser for all the programs of a church. And it was a big church. It had orphanages, it had hospitals, it had all sorts of things. And they said, since you're so gifted in fundraising, we have restructured the church. You're no longer a mission pastor. You're the number 2 in the church. You're a fundraiser. And the pastor was his best friend, thought that he was helping his friend. You're going to be the number 2, the star. And my friend was devastated. He said, I'm a mission pastor. I'm not a fundraiser. I don't want to fundraise. He said, but the board has decided, it's been done, it's too late. You're no longer a mission pastor, you're a church fundraiser. He said, I don't want it. 25 years, he'd been in the church for 30, 40 years. He was an elder. He was a full-time worker in the church. And when I met him, he said, I'm no longer an elder. I'm no longer on the staff of a church. I've had to leave the church because I can't go. And I'm out and I have nothing. A broken man, after 25 years of building the image of that church and making it known all over in North American churches, he was out on the street because of a restructuring plan. And he said, I've lost my best friend, my pastor. If I'm wounded today, it is for these people. We can't just restructure. We can't just expect people. We have to understand. People are not just, move them here, move them there, this kind of thing. It doesn't work. Very hard. But this is life. This is what we live. This is what Paul was experiencing. And I'm pleading with you, brothers and sisters, in your churches, in your organizations, don't wound people, even unintentionally. This was the most unintentional wounding. And I know the pastor, and I've sat with the pastor, and the pastor said, I don't know what to do. It's too late. We made the decision. And we really want to promote him. We love him. And the man says, no way. I'm not a fundraiser. But you raised millions. Yeah, but I didn't raise them because I was a fundraiser. I raised them because I had a passion for missions. And the money came. I didn't go out and say, I want money. I said, I want missionaries. Would you be interested in partnering? And the money came. And it came. And it came. Because these people were not fundraisers, they didn't understand that. They thought he went out and did some fundraising. He didn't. He did vision casting. And he didn't have vision for an orphanage. He didn't have vision for a hospital. He had vision for missions. And he couldn't promote something he didn't have a vision for. So he had to quit. And he lost everything. Is that the way you want to end? Is that the way you end your great career as a Christian? Paul was postponing his visit to a church he had planted because he was afraid. Because he didn't want to be humiliated. Can you believe it? These are people he brought to Christ. And he was afraid that if he went to them, they would humiliate him. That word humble is better translated humiliated, I said. I fear that my God may humiliate me before you. And I have to mourn over many. And then there was sin there too. But it was more the hurt and the difficulty. Let's go on. Sorry. He was wounded by people he loved. His good intentions were misunderstood. He feared that during his upcoming visit, he would be blamed rather than being thanked. Brothers and sisters, we can't afford more wounded Christians. Please, please don't be part of wounding something. If you've wounded something, someone try to make it up. Try to heal the wounds. Don't use the weapons of the world in Christian work. 30 years I've been running the Bible Society by Christian principles, I hope. And some people say it's not going to work. You're too kind. You're too... But you know what? The greatest characteristic we had a new man join us a few years ago. He said, I've never seen the loyalty of people to your organization as I see in the Bible Society. People are loyal when you know that you care for them. You can't always do what they want, but you really care for them. You're not just using them. When I evaluated my ministry with students after 10 years in Canada, I sent a questionnaire to 25 people, and I said, evaluate me. 2 of them said, you burned us out. I said, what do you mean? He said, you were so excited by us that you made us believe we could do things that we couldn't do. One said, when I was with you, I felt I was like the Apostle Paul. When you left, and he's the man who took over ministry for me, I realized I was Balaam's ass. We're still friends. But you see, I was so excited about these people that I may have used them for myself, not for their self. And I told myself I never want to do that again. Never want to burn someone. To be so excited about them that I push them beyond their capacity. Okay, how to end your ministry well. My recipe. You know, do this and everything will be okay. It's not really that way. But let me share with you something. Now you say it's obvious. Remember, it's your ministry. It's not your ministry, it's God's. But it's not easy. It's not easy. Because sometimes you think it's me. And God's given me a wife that keeps telling me, you know, she's not at all impressed that I'm the plenary speaker at ELF. It doesn't faze her at all. She hasn't even realized what ELF is and 600 people and I'm the main speaker. I mean, she says, just don't let it go to your head. Every time she writes me a WhatsApp, says, it's good. I tell her it went well, yes, it's good, but don't let it go to your head. Because even though I want to say it's God's ministry, I sometimes say it's my ministry. It's inevitable. It's inevitable, and it's very dangerous. So that's where you start if you want to end well. Always believe that you're just a servant. It's not yours. It's God's. It's God's church. It's God's organization. It's God's ministry. It seems evident, but it's not. This is very serious. Your greatest achievement will never make up for your weaknesses. Many of the scandals we've had, sexual weaknesses, all sorts of things with Christian leaders, is because they feel they've done so much, they're so famous, they've achieved so much, that people will overlook some weaknesses, some small weaknesses, whether it's sexual or behavioral or whatever. People don't. People are very unforgiving, and thankfully so in that case. And however great you are, however famous you are, however much you've achieved, that does not excuse you from being a faithful, pure, careful disciple of Jesus Christ, depending on him daily. It's not about you. So it's a corollary of the first one. If it's God's ministry, then it's not your achievement, then you have to continually struggle to overcome your weakness. You never let down. Let him who stands beware lest he falls. So your greatest achievements will not make up for your weaknesses. And then listen to trusted friends. I was sitting on a meeting once, and we had a Western organization evaluating an NGO in Egypt, a Christian NGO. And the Western group wanted to make sure they did due diligence. So they said, you have a mission statement and a mission and vision statement. So the leader of the organization said, yes, we have a mission statement and a vision statement, and we spent 2 weeks, our senior leadership, in working it out. The American organization was very impressed. Is that so? They asked. So one of the members, who was a bit snarky, if you know that word, a little bit, he said, yeah, they turned to him because they knew he was a bit outspoken. They said, let's say, call him Mark. Mark, is it true that you spent 2 weeks as a team and you made this thing? He said, yes, we did spend 2 weeks. And what our leader recommended, we approved. What our leader recommended, we approved. He was saying it wasn't our decision, it was his decision. It was a polite way of saying it wasn't a joint decision. Now, how can you have joint decisions? How can you work with trusted friends and colleagues who give you honest feedback and wise advice? I should add, spouses also give honest feedback and very wise advice. Sometimes you don't like. Sorry, let's go back one more. Plan to leave when things are going well. I've left 2 ministries before the Bible Society when things were going well. None of the staff I worked with in either of them wanted me to leave. But someone told me when I was very young. When I was very, very young, they told me, when you have a responsibility, your job should be to do it and to find someone else to do it after you. And so often we leave that decision to boards and they make the awfulest decision. You can't decide who's going to replace you, but you can certainly put in place the best people so that the board will be choosing from good people and not leave it to your board. Never leave that decision to your board. They will make the decision, but give them good options. And give them options you and the staff are comfortable with. Very, very, very important. But plan to leave when things are going well. That's the hardest time to leave. The hardest time to leave a ministry is when it's successful. It's easy to want to leave it when it's not doing well. But when everything is great, that's when you should leave. You've done your task, you turn it over to others. And it's a very important principle. And finally, try to humbly understand the relation between you and the brand God used to promote you to promote. Remember my friend, mission pastor in Latin America, he promoted the brand of his church so that many churches in America knew that church because of him. They wouldn't have known it because of him. And he did tremendous work. But when he was kicked out of that church, he lost not only his church, but he also lost his identity with the American churches he was raising funds from. Who are you now? You don't represent this wonderful big mission and church that you do. So he lost too much because he had linked himself with his brand. He and his brand were one. You know me today as a man who heads up the Bible Society of Egypt. What would I be without it? And I will be that in a very short time because I'm way past retirement age by Egypt and I'll be leaving soon. I went to a reunion of some of my classmates, Muslims, and they knew me as a child coming from the richest family in Egypt. And they all went around and said what they did. One was head of an advertising company, one had many factories. And I said, I lead the Bible Society. So one of my friends felt sorry for me. You know, Ramez, I want to say something good about it. He said, you know, Ramez is the smartest one of us all. So they said, what do you mean? He said he got the exclusive rights to the world's bestseller, and he's sitting down, sits back, and it sells itself. Now that did two things. That made them laugh and think I'm doing something good. But it also put a pin in my balloon. I'm not great. The Bible is good. It's God's word that's successful. It's not because I'm doing it. And it was a voice from God to me saying, Ramez, don't think it's all about you. It's about my word. And how to make sure that I don't take the credit for something that is God. God has used you to build up a church, to do something. Keep yourself a little bit separate from that brand. Don't get your identity from that brand. Because if your identity is too close to that brand, you'll think you made the brand or you promoted the brand. And then when you leave, you won't have anything to go with you. The good news is that while you cannot take your achievements with you, when you leave your ministry, you can if you end well. I put the if you end well. If you leave as a wounded person, if you leave with arguments, with problems with your organization, a lot of your relationships will not go with you. But if you leave well, you can keep all the positive relationships you have built over years. And this social capital is your greatest asset. It's not your achievements. It's the relationships you built over the years that you can take with you. That's what you move to your next ministry to, or that's what you retire with. That is your greatest asset. So, as we close, what plans are you making to end your present ministry well? If you don't plan from now, chances are you will end up as a wounded leader. And Paul concludes his letter by saying, brothers and sisters, rejoice, strive for full restoration, encourage one another, be of one mind, live in peace, and the God of love and peace will be with you. That's the formula for success. If you just remember 13:11, you will be a successful Christian. You will be someone who can move on and serve the Lord faithfully. My prayer for you is that you learn how to be a suffering leader, that you be a persevering leader, that you be a reconciling leader, and that you plan not to be a wounded leader.